I want you to start with your first one, please, Sally, which has deep roots in family.
Yeah, so I was very sneaky in the fact that instead of just one, I did more the people and the experiences of those peoples and the time. And so my first one is my parents, and so it would be damper for my mother. My mum is the best damper maker in the world. You know, so damper, I suppose you can say, is what, a fluffy bread.
Fluffy bread.
Fluffy bread. You know, and it's funny when you think about in the world how connected bread is in every community around the world. You know, that notion of flour, water to make, you know, whether it's a pita bread or whether it's a naan bread or whether it's a damper for, you know, First Nations people. But my mum, the way she would knead the flour and the water together to make and let it sit and rise, and, you know, now she uses, you know, raising agents into it at all. But it just reminds me of her hands.
So, the memory is her hands working the flour and the water together.
Yeah.
Kneading and combining.
But then because my mum is also a Ngangkri, so she's a traditional healer, so, you know, it makes me then think of my mum in that space when she's then being a Ngangkri and working her skills, you know, on someone who's ill, you know, and then she's also an artist, so I then you know, it's flashes of her painting and things like that. So it builds those memories of your parents, you know, as a thing. But the way she would knead, and you would just sit there and be amazed, and then
would she
just
talk while she was kneading?
Yeah, she would talk, and I mean, she would forever try and get me to do it, but I'm really bad at making damper. I don't think I have the patience for it. Or mine end up being so dense, and hers is like thick and fluffy. And it doesn't matter where. The great thing about damper, doesn't really matter where you cook it, because you can have it in a camp oven. So it's a sort of the little camp oven sort of thing that goes in the coals, or you can put it in the oven, or you can fry it on top in a frying pan. So it's a deep pan frying pan. So
where did she learn to make this damper?
When non-Indigenous people came out, like, that was the easiest sort of payment, was flour and, you know, the rations sort of.
But sorry, Sally, payment for?
Oh, whether it was them buying things or early stuff. I mean, it was dingo scalpings was one, living on the mission. It's all those sorts of things. You just get rations.
In exchange, the white man would give flour,
tea leaf and sugar, essentially.
So that's how this food came into the First Nations diet?
Well, no, because we did have damper beforehand, you know, so we've got old, you know, leaves that people used to get and grind. So you'd have to, it was a long process to grind it, and it was sort of like I suppose you can say it was more like a patty cake rather than a big damper. But yeah, you would have to grind it and get it and, you know, make it into sort of a paste, and then, yeah, you would put it on the hot coals soil near the camp, near the fire, and that's how it was. So yeah.
Well, Sally, let's move on to your second food memory, which feeds into Dad's influence.
First trip to Europe, and I went with one of my best friends, Cassia. So we travelled through, and I had a family friend. His name's Jim Newkirk, and him and his wife Irina live in Belgrade, and it was the most amazing time. Like, we were only there for one night, and it was just to see them. And I still remember this crazy restaurant. And I managed to find it on Instagram, and it's called Lorenzo's and Carcalamba, and it was just insane.
It looks like a prop shop, doesn't it?
And it looks like a prop shop. Like, you've got shadow boxes and mannequins and big sculptures of animals. It was just insane. Like, just all sorts of things. And I remember having it was a dried pork dish. It's like a traditionally dried pork steak. And I still think about it because it was just like we don't think about pork falling apart like a lamb shank does, but this is what that dish did. Like it just fully, I'm salivating as I'm thinking about it. But, like it was just sort of crumbling, and it had this incredible cheese. And it was just, I love cheese. And, we went to, when we were Gym and Arenas, they, I remember their story is that, they have this beautiful plum vodka and, they give it to us in a small sort of wine glass and, you're meant to sip it. Like it's a tradition to give someone a drink. No, me and my friend just downed it because we're traveling. I was like, no, you're meant to sip it. I was like, okay, so let's run to.
Let's have another one.
But it was that experience of someone who's linked into my dad and having that experience of my dad in Europe and things like that. It was just like, it was like the food was divine. I was just like, it was so yummy.
So, Sally, your third memory.
So when we're talking about food and culture and people's culture and what it means, my biggest sort of food culture is our desert bush foods. And my absolute favourite, I mean, that I hoarded and used honeycomb as, as a bargaining chip. Yeah. And so the desert version of that was honey ants, the one out bush. So the way to explain a honey ant is literally like a little marble on an ant. Not even a marble. Like I think it's maybe a little bit smaller than that. And it was like the purest honey, the purest maple syrup you can possibly have. And we call them jala. And it is divine.
So how would you you'd have to catch the ant?
No. So it's a whole process. So the way you do it is you wait until after it rains because the ground is softer. So after it's rained, because you're digging into it, you're digging into the ground. So you go to a particular tree, you would follow like a worker ant on the outside. You'd have to find one which sort of had a white bum on it, and you follow that and you see where it goes and you scrape the top layer of the ground to see where the hole is. And you'd follow, and the worker breeds. So you've got to remember, if this is the topsoil, you're looking at least 1.5 meters before you actually hit any honey ants.
So that's a lot of digging.
A lot of digging. Why? You wait until after the rain.
Because it's easy to break down, of course.
It's easier to break down because the ground's all soft, and so you can really then dig in, and it's incredible. And like it was sort of like these ants sort of had their own honey ants had their own little cave inside. The way Mum used to do it was she would grab a root that was, because you're digging into the root of the tree, essentially. And so she would grab a really thin, like a baby root, I suppose you can say, and she would lick it, and she would scrape the top bit of this little in cave, and would drop, because the honey ants would be sort of like bats hanging on top of the
upside down.
And so you scrape it off so they're not catching anymore, and then she would scoop it, and she'd always scoop it up with a handful of red sand.